I know you must have been as excited as I was the other day when Trump finally signed the flag burning ban. It's about time, right? Oh, I don't know if you're like me, but I'm sick of the flag burning. It's everywhere. I literally walk out of my building, downstairs, onto the street. There's two or three burnings within my block almost every day. And one or two of those burnings causes a riot almost every day. Every day there's riots on every block in Manhattan. It's really crazy. It's out of hand. And Biden just let it go on like this forever, like he didn't care. He was a disaster. Biden was so weak. He did nothing about the flag burnings. So thankfully, we have a president, finally, who takes this stuff seriously. He signed the flag burning executive order. It's going to ban flag burning forever. But before I get into it, let's take a listen at what he said. And seriously, what I want to talk about is the fact that what he says has absolutely nothing to do with what's in his executive order. And it has nothing to do in the end with flag burning either. But it does have something to do with something very serious. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. First, let's take a listen to what he said the other day before he signed it.
And as you know, through a very sad court, I guess it was a 5-4 decision. They called it freedom of speech, but there's another reason which is perhaps much more important. It's called death. Because what happens when you burn a flag is the area goes crazy. If you have hundreds of people, they go crazy. You can do other things. You can burn this piece of paper. But when you burn the American flag, it incites riots at levels that we've never seen before.
Yeah, he's got that right. It's levels we've never seen before because it doesn't really happen all that often. It's maybe been a few years since it happened, and I don't know. I honestly, in my whole lifetime, can't think of a single incident where a flag burning set off a riot. Can you? I can't think of one. I won't say in a country the size and that's this old that it's never happened, but nothing I'm aware of. Now, notice he mentioned a Supreme Court 5-4 decision. I'm going to talk about that in a minute because that's what this is all about. There was a decision in 1989 based on a case that started in 1984 during the Republican National Convention in Dallas. A man, Gregory Johnson, burned a flag. He was arrested under Texas state law and charged with flag desecration. Well, the case worked its way through the Supreme Court. 5 years later, in 1989, the decision was handed down, and they decided that he was well within his rights to burn the flag because it was seen as a protest, which obviously it was outside of the Republican National Convention. And he was trying to make his displeasure with what they were doing known, and that's the route he chose to get attention to what his views were on whatever it was he was mad about. I don't know. Um, so they ruled that that is considered free speech. But think about this. That's a broad, and I'll call it liberal. I don't mean in the sense of conservative and liberal, but I mean liberal as in we're being generous. A liberal broadening of the right to free speech. Because burning a flag is not literal speech. You don't use your mouth and tongue. You're not talking. You're performing an act. It's kind of like performance art. It's a performance to make your views known and to get attention for them. So they ruled that was good and okay, and it was covered by the First Amendment, which I think was the right decision. But as Trump mentioned, it was a 5-4 decision. Uh, so it was a very a close vote in the Supreme Court. So I wanted to look at the dissenting justices and the opinions they wrote and just sum that up for you. In this summary, as we go through it, when I look at the executive order in a minute, you'll see that the justices in 1989 that dissented from that opinion laid the groundwork for a future president with a future court, with a different makeup on the court, with a more conservative makeup like we have now. They kind of laid down the path to get to a flag burning ban and to give some kind of legal rationale why it would not be unconstitutional and it wouldn't be an infringement on speech. The reality is it will be an infringement on speech. I believe they want to set a precedent. I believe they're right now setting up a chain of events, a sequence of events that they hope will lead to the Supreme Court making a new decision on this subject. And once they do, that precedent will be set, and they'll use that precedent to further clamp down on various forms of speech that they don't like. This is a very dangerous thing. It's literally one of the first things all new budding dictators have to do. They have to figure out a way to get control of the press. They have to figure out a way to get people who criticize them to shut up. Now, you look, when I finish this, you may say, and let me know if you believe this after you hear it, but you may say, you may well say, and you know, you may have a good point. So I'm not saying this is 100% right what I'm about to say, but you may well say, well, that's kind of far fetched. You know, they're going to close the gap on free speech just a tiny bit. They're going to narrow the right just a little bit, but that's not going to stop people from criticizing the president. Well, yeah, that's probably a good point, but this is just one angle of attack this president is going after right now. Look at how many angles of attack he's using right now to suppress free speech. He's attacking journalists. He's going to their employers, the big media corporations, and attacking them and saying, look, if you don't fire that guy or if you don't pay me $15 million for what he said, I will withhold the government's authorization of something that you want to do, or I'll withdraw your broadcast license. There's any number of ways the president of the United States can hurt these media corporations. And so he's attacking on many different fronts, and this is a legal front, and this could have permanent, lasting consequences. So let me explain to you. Let's look at that Supreme Court case from 1989, and let's look at the dissenting opinions. Okay, so they basically ruled that burning a flag is a form of speech because it's a form of trying to communicate, and we cannot impinge upon that right. It's protected by the First Amendment. But look what language the dissenting justices used in their dissent, and we're going to compare it, and we're going to see that language all over this executive order. And the language we're not going to see on this executive order is what Trump will say in just a minute on the next clip I'm going to play. What he says, what he said in person on the day he signed this at the signing ceremony, what he said on that day that this executive order will do is nowhere in the executive order. Okay. So, okay. The dissenting justices basically laid out this rationale for saying it would not impinge upon free speech if a flag burning ban was allowed. And here's their reasoning. They argued that the American flag is not just another symbol, it represents national unity, sacrifice, and the very freedoms that protesters invoke. Because of this special status of the flag, the government has a legitimate interest in protecting the flag's physical integrity, the physical integrity of the flag, the actual physical flag. The government has a legitimate interest in protecting it from being damaged or, burned. All right. It sounds good. It sounds if you just listen to this and give it a cursory hearing, you're like, oh yeah, well that's good. They should protect the flag. That's legit. But it's not good, and I'm going to show you why in a minute. They also said that it's not about suppressing ideas. This flag burning ban. They said the dissenters in Texas, sorry, the dissenters in this decision said that the Texas law was not aimed at silencing Johnson's political message. Instead, it was meant to preserve the flag as a symbol of nationhood and unity, independent of any particular viewpoint. So you see, they're basically saying the flag is so sacred in American life that we have to protect it. We have to protect it. Now, Trump's going to add to this in the executive order. He's going to add a little twist to it. And he's going to say, yeah, we have to protect it because it is so outrageous to so many people when someone burns a flag that a reasonable man, using the legal reasonable man standard, a reasonable man could easily foresee that if someone burns a flag, it could start a riot, and a riot could lead to death. So he's literally going to claim in the executive order that flag burning could ultimately lead to death, but it leads to violence. They mentioned violence several times in the executive order, and there's a reason they're doing it. They're doing it to set up a Supreme Court precedent, a new Supreme Court precedent. Let's look at this executive order, actually. So, and this is from the White House website. You guys can go on and find these things very easily, just whitehouse.gov. And if I could just point out one thing that I find very annoying, see this T over here? You know how in a lot of web pages there'll be links at the top. It'll be like a Facebook icon and I don't know, whatever, an email icon, a Twitter icon, and all the icons of social media sites. And you click on it, and it instantly shares the link to the article under your profile on whatever social media site you choose. Look at this. The White House is putting the icon only for Truth Social, for the social network that the president owns himself, using a government resource. This is owned by the government, this whitehouse.gov site. That's owned by the people. And he's using it to promote his own business and no one else's. And that kind of thing is often sued for, and under monopoly laws, courts rule you can't just put one icon in a case like this. I think the court would rule that in any normal time. They say you can't do that. You either put them all or you don't put any, but you can't just put your own. Unbelievable, really unbelievable. Talk about selling the government. Talk about being in this for your own financial gain. And these people are like, no, Biden was corrupt and he was making money off of his position. And this, they don't care a thing about. Amazing, right? All right, okay, let's just look at through this real quick. I highlighted these by color. It's kind of color coded, like the colors have a connection. Like these talk about how sacred the symbol is and how violence and everything could arise from flag burning. So our great American flag is the most sacred and cherished symbol of the United States of America. Look, let's go back real quick to the dissenters in the Supreme Court hearing. They argue the American flag is not just another symbol. It represents national unity and sacrifice and the very freedoms that we have. Back to the executive order. The American flag is the most sacred and cherished symbol in the United States and of American freedom, identity, and strength. They're using the language and the rationale of what the justices set down in 1989 as a possible path to having that overturned. All right. They can go to the Supreme Court now and say, look, according to the dissenters in that 1989 opinion, you could look at it this way. And that's a legal precedent that they set down, at least a theoretical precedent. It didn't win in the majority, but you could overturn that and use this precedent to go by. All right. And then down here, the American flag is a special symbol in our national life that should unite and represent all Americans of every background and walk of life. Desecrating it is uniquely offensive and provocative. This is very important. I'm going to get to this in a minute. It's a statement of contempt, hostility, and violence against our nation. It should be starting to come clearer now where this is all going. Look at this. Desecrating the flag is uniquely offensive and provocative. Now, if they can get the Supreme Court to rule that flag burning bans are constitutional on the grounds that it's uniquely offensive and provocative, that's going to open Pandora's box about free speech. And I'll tell you how in a minute. And then they add it's a statement of contempt, hostility, and violence against our nation. If they can get the Supreme Court to endorse any of this language, you know what it does? It sets a precedent that says, forget the flag burning now. We're off of flag burning. We're on to websites and magazine articles and the written words now. Imagine an article in the Huffington Post or Media Matters or Slate Magazine or whatever. Or words from liberal YouTubers or conservative YouTubers like me, like myself, who are just anti this administration. Okay? Imagine they could then go and file a case against you because they could say Jonathan Burton said something on his video, on his YouTube video, that is uniquely offensive and provocative. It's a statement of contempt. Look, so say I criticize the president. They could say that's a statement of contempt because the president was voted by, was elected by all the people. He represents all the people. So when Jonathan says something against him, he's saying it's an attack on all the people. Do you see? That's where this is going. That's where this is going. Burning this representation of America may incite violence and riot. They could say any podcaster, any YouTube video, or anybody creating content, any media company, by criticizing the administration, by criticizing things the government is doing, they could easily say that is a representation of America that they're criticizing, and that might incite violence and riot. So if they can get the Supreme Court to adopt any of this language, they are well on the way to using the courts to shut down free speech that's critical of what they're doing. Now, to show you they know about it, they know what I'm talking about. They know. They're not just flying by the seat of their pants. Notwithstanding the Supreme Court's rulings on First Amendment protections, and that's the case I just talked about. They're talking about that case. The court has never held that American flag desecration conducted in a manner that is likely to incite imminent lawless action or that is an action amounting to fighting words is constitutionally protected. Okay? So they're saying there's no law against burning a flag that's constitutional, but the court has never held that desecrating the flag in a manner that's likely to incite lawless action or illegal activities is constitutionally protected. So what they're going to do is go to court, guy burns a flag, they're going to say, you know what? He committed arson. And then the court's going to say, yeah, well, in that case, he can't burn a flag because it was actually arson. In other words, there's an underlying crime that they're going to, dig at. And they admit that right here. And they mentioned this Texas versus Johnson case from 1989. That's the case I was just talking about. Yeah, they know what they're doing. They really, and that's the scary thing here, because I know the president has no idea how any of this works, but somebody's pulling strings in the White House and they're getting done what they want to get done. And that's pretty scary, I have to say. Then the order says, my administration will act to restore respect and sanctity to the American flag and prosecute those who incite violence or otherwise violate our laws. Now notice, he doesn't say prosecute those who burn the flag. He says prosecute those who incite violence, because you can't prosecute anyone right now for burning a flag, but you can always prosecute someone for inciting violence. So the next time somebody burns a flag, they're going to say he was inciting violence, and they're going to prosecute him. Notice also in all of this, there's nothing about it being a year in jail. All right. So let's move down. The next section says the Attorney General shall prioritize the enforcement to the fullest extent possible of our nation's criminal and civil laws against acts of American flag desecration that violate applicable content-neutral laws while causing harm unrelated to expression. You see here? They cannot prosecute anybody for burning a flag as a means to express themselves. But they say here, if that causes harm that's unrelated to the expression of your political views, then we will prosecute. And what they're going to prosecute is the underlying crime, not the flag burning. So you see, he gets on and he says, we're banning flag burning and it's going to be a year in jail. And yet that's not mentioned anywhere here.
And what the penalty is going to be, if you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail, no early exits, no nothing. You get 1 year in jail. If you burn a flag, you get, and what it does is incite to riot. I hope they use that language, by the way. Did they?
Yeah, incitement.
Incite to riot. And you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail. You don't get 10 years, you don't get 1 month. You get 1 year in jail, and it goes on your record.
In cases where the Department of Justice or another executive department or agency determines that an instance of American flag desecration may violate an applicable state or local law, such as open burning restrictions, okay? You live in a neighborhood and they say you can't have open fires in this neighborhood. You burn a flag there, the U.S. Department of Justice will now go after you, not just local authorities. But they will not be going after you for flag burning. They'll be going after you for violating those local laws and on burning restrictions, okay, regardless of what you burned. They'll go after you on disorderly conduct laws or destruction of property laws. The agency shall refer the matter to the appropriate state or local authority for potential action. So they're admitting here that in these state matters with local laws, they can't do anything, but they will refer it to state authorities. All right, last but not least, to the maximum extent permitted by the Constitution, which we've seen right now is not much. The Constitution, by way of Supreme Court rulings, does not permit any prosecution for simply burning a flag, as long as you're not violating any other laws in the process. To the maximum extent permitted by the Constitution, the Attorney General shall vigorously prosecute those who violate our laws in ways that involve desecrating the American flag and may pursue litigation to clarify the scope of the First Amendment exceptions in this area. See, they're going to pursue litigation to clarify the scope of the First Amendment exceptions in this area, and then they're going to use the path that the Supreme Court justices in 1989 who dissented from this ruling laid down for them, as is evidenced by the fact that the first couple of paragraphs, or the first paragraph at least, of this executive order is almost mimicking word for word the dissenting opinions in 1989. So that's what I believe this is all about. And I would recommend to people who might be inclined to burn a flag over the next 3.5 years to just hold off a little bit, because guess what? How can we stop them from using the Supreme Court to set new precedents that narrow the scope of free speech in this country? Just don't give them a case. Don't give them an opportunity to find a case of flag burning to go to the court with. So don't burn a flag for the next 3.5 years. Come on. That stops all of this in their tracks. If there's no incidents of flag burning, then there's nothing to take to the Supreme Court. So that's that's one way we, the people, in this case, have some power to do something about it. But if they can get this right, if they can get this right to burn flags overturned by the Supreme Court, they'll effectively set a new precedent that any speech that could conceivably be offensive or provocative, or that would incite contempt or hostility or violence against our nation, can be limited. So they'll post write something they don't like. They're like that. They're inciting violence. And then the courts will say, you got to shut that article down. You can't write articles like that. That's where this is headed. So let's don't burn any flags for a couple of years, okay? Let's don't give them the chance to do this. Anyway, look, if you're a Christian who's alarmed by what you see going on in the name of Christ today through this administration and all the political things going on in our world today, I know I didn't talk anything about that during this, and that's fine. But I always want to close with it, because I am a Christian and I'm alarmed about what's going on. And I'm alarmed especially because so many people who also claim to be Christians are the ones supporting it and the ones making it happen. And I think that's all bad, and I think that's all wrong. And I in no way would ever incite violence to do anything about this. But I will always uh, resort to talking and persuading. And that's what this is all about. That's why I have this channel. Anyway, if you are likewise alarmed, like I am, click subscribe and let's work together for the good of our nation and for the glory of our God. All right? Thanks for watching. I'm Jonathan Burton, and I'll see you next time.